Welcome to Business Success Tips, where you can learn to make more money in less time and have more fun, especially focusing on the more fun part. I'm the founder of Contractor Staffing Source, Paul Sanneman, and we help contractors build great teams. Now, Gavin Coyle, I'm excited about this one. I mean, this is something we normally don't cover, which is awesome. Gavin Coyle is from the Gavin Coyle Group. That makes sense, right? And so Gavin's talking about something that I think is ignored a lot. It's called safety. It's like, especially in the US, like, when people have a safety inspection, it's never good news, like an IRS audit, right? Nobody looks forward to it. Uh, and OSHA does not have like, oh, I love OSHA. They're so wonderful. They help my employees. I don't think that happens much over here, right? So, so Gavin, tell me your background, how you got into it, and what you do.
Paul, listen, thank you very much for having me as a guest. I really appreciate it, and I love what you guys do, and I love your disruption in the space of recruitment. I think it's a fantastic model, so well done on that. In regards to myself, I started off, came out of school early, didn't really succeed at school level, and went straight into construction as a labourer. And at the time, American multinationals were coming into Ireland, where I now reside and I've always lived. And they were building large scale, hyperscale projects like the likes of Intel, GlaxoSmithKline, Beecham, Hewlett Packard, IBM. They were using Ireland as a sort of a stepping stone into Europe back in the 90s. And I suppose I didn't realize it, but at the time I was at the front face of that in terms of construction. And with these multinational projects, obviously came a lot of focus and reputational issues were a main source of concern for the multinationals. What if we have a fatality on the project? We don't want to hurt the community or to be seen to be having fatalities or large amount of accidents and incidents. So they brought their own models with them, and safety was part of those models. Now, in Ireland at the time, there wasn't such a thing as a full-time health and safety officer or representative that would represent a contractor. You might have a safety manager for the business, or you might have a consultant, or you might have just someone going between the sites maybe, but you wouldn't have a full-time dedicated health and safety officer on a project. And that was one of the requirements on a lot of these projects. So very quickly, the Irish workforce had to get up to speed with regards to health and safety. There was a good legal framework in place. It was old school, but it still wasn't bad. But then with the American influence that was coming through and these models that were being strictly put in front of the contractors, if you sign up for these contracts, you must have a full-time safety professional, and you must, comply with all these programs that we're going to bring with us, like incident and injury-free culture, and a lot of that sort of DuPont, JMJ, Associates type models. So I suppose I went from lifting plasterboard to being sort of, hey, Gavin, you're out of school, you know how to open up a textbook, and you're going to that meeting because none of us have time.
Okay.
I think most safety people will recognize that comment in terms of who are we going to pick. It's not because I think he might be the safest person. He's probably not worth as much to us as we need at the moment. So
Right.
we'll give him the health
Right.
and safety role. And so I went to a safety position on that particular project, and I loved it. I love the whole concept of, how do you try and make people safe, and how do you protect people's lives? And um, got stuck into it straight away, and the company then recognized, okay, this is getting bigger, so we need to train Gavin up and get him qualified through the university program. So I went back as a mature student at night, and within the space of about a year and a half, I was on a project, and I got a bang on the door of a cabin. We were on a Four Seasons hotel project that we were building, and one of our guys had fallen down a hole head first, and we had to go down, or I had to go down into the hole into the area where he was, and he was screaming for his life, and went into the ambulance with him, and he passed away of his injuries the following day or within 2 days from head injury. So I had firsthand in my hands somebody's life that is seen sort of falling away from me and from what I was supposed to be doing in terms of managing safety for this company. Now, we all
That
took,
must have been quite an emotional, trying experience for you, right?
oh, like it's like the reality of what you're doing and how and what you're trying to achieve and the objectives of what you're trying to do on a day-to-day basis. And you're getting sort of glib comments of that's only health and safety, and oh, you guys are always in the way, and
Right.
that type of, I was used to that. I know the language, the common construction language, as we all do, and you
Mhm.
get used to the banter. And I always felt that I had a good interpersonal relationship with the guys, and I treated them with respect. But our own guys were shaking and were vulnerable and were angry as well. That how could it come to a situation where there was a 17-year-old boy basically uh, killed, and his brother happened to be on site as well,
Now,
which
did
didn't
you
make.
feel any kind of responsibility for his death? Like I should have done a better job or anything like that? Or you could
Oh,
have done.
100%. I wouldn't make any excuses today even about that. Like, at the end of the day, I wouldn't. I'm not making any excuses, but you know did I bring that to the attention of the principal contractor at the time? Yes. Was there loads of red flags? Yes. Did I bring it to the attention of my employer? Yes, I did. But, you know, perfect world scenario, people can't just walk away from contracts. And I learned the commercial reality of health and safety as well. Like, even though I was pushing the buttons to say, look, this is a dodgy site, contractually companies couldn't really at the time couldn't really walk away because it would take down them in terms of what they had signed up to. So you
Right.
know deal with it, get on with it, and make the best of it. So I remember having deep conversations, and it was a case of like, Gavin, try and give it as much attention as you can, but like, with the best will in the world, as you know, construction is so dynamic and so fast moving. It's nanoseconds for to kill somebody, and
Yeah.
that's the one thing that really got to me that day. Was like, within the flash of an eye, this guy was in my hands in an ambulance, and then the doctors were telling me this is not good. Like, and I actually didn't think he was life threatening, and I knew, like, he was kicking and screaming, and there was a complete carnage in the ambulance. But I didn't think to the extent that, oh, he's going to die. That didn't, like, that completely just threw me off. The next day, I was like, got a phone call. That young that's gone. He's gone where? He's passed. I was like, and then I suppose within another 12 to 24 months, my own brother drowned, along with two other guys that were playing with a football. They just finished school, and their exams were coming up, and they decided to go to the beach and were just randomly throwing football to each other waist high and the Atlantic Ocean, and a freak wave came in and swept them out to sea. So I suppose within the space of 2 years, I had two massive personal traumatic events, one professional, one personal. And it was kind of a real sort of, do you want to stick in health and safety? Because
Right. Wow, that's tough.
this is kind of, these are bad events. And there was no counseling at the time as well, Paul. Thinking about it now, the people do get a lot of support. I'm not saying that I went off the rails. Somewhere deep inside me, I had the tools to deal with it. But would I have taken counseling at the time? Now that I look back on it, yeah, I probably should have. Unlike everybody else, like, I know the project manager never recovered from it because he took the overall hit. It was my project. It was on my watch. It was my job. It was my responsibility. Blah blah blah. And it was like everybody trying to say, "Look, you done the best you could do," but it didn't matter. Like, the words at that stage, words are nothing.
Right.
People think that the actions that they didn't do was the reason that the person died. I probably, on reflection, would have more of a spiritual type of a think about if your time is up, your time is up. But there is obviously ways to mitigate against
Right.
an inevitability. So we're constantly looking at the non-event of safety. How do you prevent something happen that might happen that might never happen? And this is the problem
So
where
with
safety gets a
with
bad name, I
Coyle Group,
suppose.
what is it? How do you? I mean, I've been involved in construction for 40 years, and I know safety should be a much higher priority than it is. And unfortunately, at least in the US, it's like, oh yeah, I've got, OSHA, I've got to do this stuff. But it's not like primary. I mean, it probably should be, but until something happens, some people don't worry about it. In fact, some people don't even know what to do. I mean, I think there's a lot of, I've never been on a job with a safety officer in the United States, like especially small ones,
Yeah.
especially the guys that are listening to this. They're, 3 to 15 people. They're gonna have a safety officer. So what can they do to prevent accidents? How do they know that they're doing everything they can? And what measures can they take to make sure nobody gets hurt?
Well, the obvious question, number one, and this might sound sort of left field, but as a leader, you need to have empathy. And if you don't have empathy, you really are not clued into minding your people. Your mind direction is in a different direction. And I've seen that with leaders and owners of businesses. I'm not saying broadly speaking, but you can gauge the empathy or non-empathy of people. Now, it's very easy to get have a non-empathy and be very successful because you're so driven and you're so focused on running through walls to get to where you need to go to build and scale, and everything becomes about, well, I've had a hard life, so get on with it, and
Right.
you want to work with me, you're going to do your I'll pay you and I'll make sure you're looked after money wise, but I'm going to put you through the ringer. And we've all been there working at 4 o'clock in the morning on a
Mhm.
project because the project manager was a workaholic, or the construction manager
Right.
was a workaholic, or the owner's a workaholic. That's all well and good, and we see this more and more, even today, is that business owners in constructions, and I'm talking about small to medium sized construction owners, become construction owners before they become business owners.
Right.
And
It's a conversion. We call it from a craftsperson to an entrepreneur. Because as a
yes,
craftsperson, you're a plumber, electrician, whatever you do. And in a way, all the safety stuff, the hard hats, the right gear, I've seen people take stuff off their skill saws because it gets in the way. They move the safety guard because it's faster. I'm sure you've seen that, right?
yeah, like,
I
well,
had
yeah,
one guy. I actually one guy once, and there was this thing in a table saw where they came up with some technology where if you get your hand in a table saw and the table saw just touches your finger, it stops instantly. So nobody's going to cut their fingers off, right? I was
yeah,
trying to promote that to some of my clients. They go, man, you know how much the thing costs? Like I could buy a table saw for like 3,000. This thing's like 6,000. That's $3,000. I said, what's the guy's hand worth? Come on.
yeah,
But
yeah,
it's
yeah.
just not, it's not in the culture. I don't think it's safety we're not like a culture-based, safety-based culture. So let's get the
And look,
job, right?
I wouldn't like you to broad stroke the United States or Canada in terms, like, it's happening in Europe as well. It's not like there is an issue with regards to how you're better off looking at the angle from how do people see safety people and what is their function. And so what happens there is construction owners go, well, he's a safety officer, so it's his, or she's a safety officer, so it's their responsibility.
Right.
So that's how it started evolving it with that mentality. So it came from not having safety people focused full time on projects to, okay, I'll have the safety person, but if I'm going to have you, you're costing me money. So therefore, anything that goes wrong in this job it's your responsibility. It's not my
Right.
responsibility. So then there's
Right.
kind of a shift where people are trying to say, well, look, legally, in a lot of jurisdictions, if something's going to go down and it's a problem, like in the UK, you can be done for manslaughter and brought to jail, and there, people have been jailed, construction owners, for that reason. But I suppose I look at it from a global perspective, and I think the function of the safety person is part of the problem. So, people get involved in safety then who might have a power trip, or they're in there for the wrong reasons, or they have some sort of a bias in the system where they, might have had an accident, and then their whole world is defined by that accident, and
Right.
they're over the top in terms of health and safety. So, and then you go to college and you learn safety, but you don't really learn how to build things or
Hmm.
manufacture things. So you don't know where the other people are coming from. So you can't relate to an engineer that is
Right.
building a wind turbine or a power station, because you've no experience in that,
Right.
it's we like
Well,
we
and sometimes there's a conflict of interest between do it quick and fast and make money and do it safely. You know what I mean?
Well,
There's
there's
this
a
kind of
conflict. What I'm saying is, in most scenarios, there's a conflict of interest straight away, because the safety guy or person wants to get the job done safely, and the other person wants to get the job done and wants to get
right,
paid and go home.
right,
So, we've been working in the last couple of years to try and re-engineer how to roll out a program, exactly what you've just asked in your question. And I'm sorry, it might seem like a long way around to get to the
right,
answer, but I think you have to go back in that scenario and say, well, look, where are we at the moment? And we still are at that place. So what we're saying is, let's make it, let's take all the barriers down for everybody to get access to safety. So let's first of all agree that safety doesn't cost that much really to get done, and to be done at a particular standard in
right,
order to keep people safe. And if we come to that common agreement, and this is what we're trying to work with small to medium enterprises on a new business we set up 2 years ago, which was, how do we get to the hearts and minds of the small to medium enterprise builder and give them all the tools and give them access to stuff that they think it's not possible in terms of health and safety, to give them the fundamentals and the foundations to be successful, and
right.
then let them.
It's a bit like recruiting because in a sense, we offer all the recruiting tools that a big corporation has to a small company because we have done a different way. I think you're
Yeah,
similar in the sense that, a big corporation has this whole safety management system. They got a lot of resources to, enact some kind of safety program that makes sense. But when
yeah,
you have two guys in a truck or, four guys, they don't have the resources normally
no,
to like put together a really good safety program. It's just like, okay,
no.
fine.
So
But it sounds
we
like
set up a
you've got some
membership.
answers for that, right?
Yeah, well, we set up a membership platform, Gavin Coyle, and we said, let's just give them all the paperwork they need in a professionalized manner for free. And everyone's going, you're crazy. And I said, no, because let's somebody has to break the mold and stand in the middle and be the better person, if you like, in the
Right,
scenario, and say, look, let's be mature about this. You're taking this down from WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups. You're getting, peer-to-peer documents of people that you know in the industry. Hey, I'm doing a painting job. Can you get me a risk assessment for painting a roof or painting
right,
side of a house or whatever it is?
right,
I don't care. And we're saying, no, let's formalize that, let's professionalize that, and let's just give it to them in a structured, professional manner. And let's open up the conversation with them to say, right, there you go. And if you never come back to us again, that's fine too. We're not going to hold you and we're not going to chase you and we're not looking for your credit cards. But we want you to accept that you need to have some level of foundational expertise to get yourself up and running. And with the best will in the world, the inspectorates or the guys that are that are following up on the framework in the different countries, they're not going to really give you the answers to what you're looking for. They're going to tell you what you shouldn't do,
right.
which is all negative
Well,
conversations.
they're like an enforcement agency, right? They're not
Yeah,
they're looking for you to find a rule you break so they can come down on you because you
so they
broke a
can act
rule
on it.
versus
Yeah,
supporting you on how do you make sure people don't get hurt. I think it's a different kind of position, right?
100%, a hundred
But
percent.
one's
Now,
like an enforcement agency, like we're enforcing this. If you
yeah,
hurt somebody, we're going to come down on your case. And the other is more of a how do we prevent stuff from ever happening, right?
well, it's reactive and proactive. Yeah, it's
Right.
definitely yeah. So we're definitely, like, so we're providing free training, free documents, all that kind of stuff, and then what we're saying to them is, do you know what? get on with your life, get on with your building, be a success, and we're here when you need us. But like when you start scaling, you're going to have to bring safety with you at some stage. Come back to us and let's have that conversation, because that will be more of a mature conversation for us and for you, and a
Mhm.
more valued conversation. So I wrote the book Workplace Safety on a Budget, which is on Amazon, which is basically for everybody from a multinational all the way to a one man in a van type organization. And we're
Mhm.
basically saying, here's all the tips and techniques we've learned through the years to reduce the cost of safety so that you don't have to spend too much time on safety. And so we're trying to integrate to get people to have their own culture of, do you know what? Why don't we make the foreman more accountable and more experienced and more knowledgeable about safety, so that I know I can trust that person more to manage my safety for me. And so
So,
what does that look like?
how do you get, like, most of the people listening say have like 3 to 5, 10 employees. How do you get safety integrated into a small remodeling company or concrete company or painting company, like using scaffolding, using ropes, using hard hats, all that stuff? How do you get it integrated into their culture so they see it as like a necessary thing to do a good job versus something that gets in the way of doing it faster?
So, a great question. The type of companies that you're talking about, what we found is the owner is also in the business. They're not generally on the business.
Right.
So that's a problem in itself. And that goes back to our earlier conversation about they're still not business owners. They're still, on the
Tradespeople, yeah.
trade, on the tools.
Right.
And so, by definition of that logic and that model, the employees are watching that person, and they're taking the lead role from that person. So
Right.
unless there's unless there's a willingness to, you know, to insert, and I'm only talking about, I don't want everybody to go out and say, we're going to go, we're going to put signs everywhere, we're going to stop everybody from
Right.
work. I'm
Right.
small changes. So what we're saying is small, subtle changes, like like a 5 minute conversation with all the staff, with all the guys before you start the job. Gather around the toolbox or gather around the gang box, guys. I want you to go home safe today. We're going to be working on the roof. We're going to be working outside. We're in the elements. Let's be smart. And they only have to be small little conversations at the start, but those conversations become ingrained. The next thing, all of a sudden, you're starting to create an
Well,
organic culture.
I think what you're talking about is how do we get safety in the core values of the company, right? I mean, how does it,
Yeah.
it's a core value, like you don't get on a roof without a line, or you don't get on the job without a hard hat, or you don't like take your, your guard off your skill saw if you're going to use it. I mean, the culture is we do things right and we do them safely. We don't take shortcuts that could be a little faster but could cause risk. And
Yeah.
how do you ingrain that in a culture in a small company? So say, I mean, safety comes first. People talk about that, but I don't see there's a lot of experience of that. You know what I mean?
No, you don't know, because unfortunately, there's a massive problem, which is getting worse, which is the shortage of labor. Number one, number two, which is the quality of the labor, and number three, the expectations on productivity is through the roof. So
Yeah.
there's so much pressure on people to finish these jobs and move on to the next job, and then people are winning contracts that they do not have the capacity to deliver on. That's why we have another program called the Business of Safety. We've saved a company in excess of €1 million by changing their mindset into regards to how they operate as a company. And we looked at safety, because safety has an element in every part of every business, whether it's
Right.
recruitment, whether it's administration, whether it's operations. Safety has some touch point. And I have a case study where we re-engineered how that company actually done their work. And by doing that, it saved them time, it saved them money, and it gave them more money and more time to invest in other areas of the business, which created more scale for the business. But
Right.
I was talking at boardroom level at that, and I'm talking a 50 million turnover business that
Hmm.
changed their ways. But it took a lot of conversation. It took months and months to convince them that this was the way forward to change their work practices,
Right.
in order to do that. And we call that the business of safety. So safety can actually make you money, and you can turn safety into a good and a profit good, and not just a compliance good. we have a model around that, and we're constantly pushing that. But that's further down the maturity tree.
I mean, I think there's
What we're talking
another,
about here is let's
yeah,
do the
I'm
let's do the
saying,
bare minimum. Let's do the bare
right,
minimum. Let's just get the paperwork right. Let's not do loads of paperwork that's going to suffocate the job and just
right.
take people out into a different mindset. Let's just do the bare minimum safety
But I
and get
think
the
a
bare
lot of
minimum
people
products
sort of don't know
paperwork
what
right.
they don't know. You know what I mean? It's like, when everybody was like union contractors and you went through union training, there's this whole kind of, you know,
Yeah,
professional skill. When you come out like a union carpenter or a union electrician, there's a certain amount of training and skill and apprenticeship and the whole kind of process. If you're John Doe and you've been thrown on the job, you've never done a framing job in your life, they throw you a nail gun and say go for it, and they give you 5 minutes of training and say hit it, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot, literally, right? So,
yeah.
and
Look, I'll be honest with you, Paul. The day of frightening or coming up with these kind of like if you don't look after your employees, you're going to go to jail, or you're going to be in serious trouble. That message doesn't ring a bell anymore to employers. Employers, generally speaking, are not reckless or ruthless to the point of putting people in harm's way. They don't want to kill people. They might have this, as I said to you, lack of empathy. And if you're an employer and you're listening to this, and you do feel that, well, empathy is not really my strong point, put somebody in there that does have empathy and give them the responsibility. You don't have to take that ownership, but you can pass that on if you don't think you have that skill set. And we see that as well. If somebody's slowing down and they're not as effective in their workplace, but they have a good knowledge of your workplace and your culture, you can give them that extra bit of responsibility for safety and say, look, I know you're not qualified, but can you help me navigate this whole health and safety thing, because you have a better bond with the guys than me. The guys are afraid of me, and they'll do it out of fear, because I'm a goer. I'm just pushing through doors and through block walls. Whereas you have a better bond. There'll always be a yin and yang within every company, and it's about people that finding those qualities within their own team. And then there might be somebody that wants to retire and say, look, okay, come off the tools, and why don't you just come in and help me with the paperwork and with the safety and that type of stuff. You can put the college stuff on top of that later on. If someone has a real, graw and said, yeah, I really want to do this, I like it, that's
well,
fine. And,
now,
there's plenty of
how,
access to do that.
how do you integrate? Like, let's say the owner, of a small construction company, he in his heart wants to be safe. He wants to, do the right thing. He
Yeah.
wants to make sure that, you follow the rules, and he does everything he can to make sure nobody gets hurt. But by the time it gets to the foreman gets to the carpenter gets the apprentice, it sort of gets watered down. You know what I mean?
It does, yeah.
How do we integrate? How do you integrate that into the culture so it truly is a safety first culture, where that empathy you're talking about is integrated into the value of the company? And if somebody sees somebody not wearing a hard hat, hey Joe, you really put a hard hat on. Or see somebody on a roof without a rope, hey, I think we should put a rope on the roof. Or
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
day-to-day kind of things like, you need to put some goggles on, guy, because that's hard on your eyes. You're using a skill sign to get something where people are looking out for each other. You know what I mean? Like, they
Yeah.
care about their fellow workers. And if they see somebody that's doing like not wearing goggles or not wearing a hard hat, they politely say, dude, I really appreciate, I think it's better for all of you to wear those goggles, because it's just a better way to do it.
Well,
How
if
do
you
you
if you
make it
if you,
happen
if
in
you
a
talk
company?
so if you talk to any of the coaches in the sports world, very few of them will come back to you and say, um, we won the championship based on, we had a super striker, and only for that
Right.
striker we wouldn't have won the championship. They will not tell you that. They'll tell you that the team won the championship.
Right.
And it's only going to be a point to where you decide that, even with a guy who might be with you for the last 10 years or 15 years, but he constantly will not do or fall into the safety, until you make that dramatic move to say, look, last chance here. If you don't fall in and do the safety stuff, I'm going to have to let you go. I'm sorry, but
But
I've got a
yeah,
family, and I've got a mortgage, I've got commitments. And it really is only then that the rest of the workers will see, oh my God, Gavin's really,
But
serious with the
I
safety
mean,
stuff.
to take the sports analogy, my son is on like a soccer team, and they had this star guy, but he was hogging the ball, and he was always knocking everybody on the team. And even though he was the best player on the team, the coach got rid of him because he
Yeah,
goes, "You are not helping the team, dude." And
no,
the team started winning championships when they got rid of the best player because it
yeah,
became a team, right?
yeah. All the boats have to float together. Everything has to come
Right,
at one, and it's not rocket science. Like there's plenty of people out there that will back up the models of how do we work within teams. How do the dynamics of a team work together? You
right.
always, yeah, you have one leader. That's correct, and then the leader then can sort of put their values and mission and let that play out on a day-to-day basis, how they speak, how they look, how they act, how they perform. And then once they put the right, as you say, players in the positions that they're most effective, and those players all carry out the same sort of values and mission,
Hmm.
should be no issue. it's it's
Right. So
it's it's not, this is you know it's not rocket science what we're talking about here. The issue is here there's bias, and there's obviously personal relationships that, oh, but I can't get rid of Paul because he's with me for the
yeah.
last 10
Yeah,
years.
he never wears a hard hat, but he's a good producer. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
So, um, Gavin, to me, this is incredibly important. I think that you can make literally save lives in the workplace, which I think is like there's nothing more important than that. And save people from getting hurt. How do people get in touch with you? Because we've got a lot of contractors, hundreds and hundreds of thousands, actually, I think it's 1 million in the United States. How do they get to you, and how do they get that information so they can start having safety more ingrained in their value system and get the team to be safe and all that? How do they do that? How do they get a hold of you?
So if they reach out to us at gavin-coyle.com, what we'll do is we'll set up a discovery call with them, regardless of whether they want to work with us or not. We'll give them the safety documentation that they need, and we'll tell them the different options, and we'll look at their business, and we'll give them some tips and advice on how best to be safe. And they can either implement them and do it themselves, or they can say, look, do you know what? I'd actually like a bit more support, and we've other membership models. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to empower people to give them all the information, all the training at a budget price, and then have some sort of like a call center approach. That if, for example, there's a, oh my God, I don't know how to deal with this situation, they pick up the phone to us, and we'll have an expert in construction, 15, 20 years experience, sitting in the background
So if
going,
some guy says,
do this, don't do that.
my best carpenter won't use a guard on his, skill set. I mean, real specific, right? Or,
Yeah.
guys working on the roof that aren't using a rope, or I've got guys not wearing hard hats. They could
Mm.
actually call you and say, how do I get my guys to comply? They could
Yeah.
actually answer that question.
Yeah. So I'm all about business. Let me tell you about that. Like, my background is I have a master's in safety of 25 years experience, but I am all about, like, you can't, safety is just another integral part of the overall business. So I'm coming at it from a commercial perspective. How do you win more business? How do you create better reputation for your business? How do you look good within your business? And I'm using safety as the tool for you to do that. And then I will
Right.
design your model around your business and
Yeah.
your expectations and your budget in order for you to fulfill that
Right.
objective.
And I also think you're going to attract better employees in a sense if, they know
100%.
my old boss didn't really care where I had her at or not, or other guys were like breaking all these rules and put my life in danger, and he didn't care. And you actually do care about me, and I'd rather work for you than him, kind of thing, right? I'm sure that helps
Well,
your.
I'll give you, there's another part of that, which is, hey, I like working with you. I know there's 5 or 6 guys I know that would love to work with your business because they're working with this other guy and he just doesn't care. He just doesn't. And these guys are brilliant tradespeople, but they're being treated like really bad. Next thing, all of a sudden, it's word of mouth and it's references. And then you're starting to build up this, this guy cares, and, he looks after people, and, wants to see people succeed. And I mean, succeed both from a money perspective, from a safety perspective, and from a career perspective.
Great. Okay, so one more time, Gavin, where do people get in touch with you?
Best place is gavin-coyle.com and book in a discovery call. You'll see a link on the website. Happy to have a chat with anybody, regardless of whether, whatever the challenge is, it doesn't matter. We've seen it all from the ground right up.
Right. So people listening to this podcast, if I guarantee there's something you can do to improve the safety in your company, no matter how safe you are, there's something else you can do. So I would suggest you give Gavin a call. It's a free call. Come on, and you'll have a safer company and a better company result of making that call. So thank you, Gavin. I really appreciate being here, and I hope people listen to what you're saying because it's incredibly important.
Thank you very much for having me, and I wish you all a safe and pleasant day.
Thank you.